Welcome to today's podcast, and I'm really excited to touch again my lovely country, Canada, and which time I have Julia Borgan in the house. Welcome, Julia.
Jürgen, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's quite beautiful snow outside. I'm facing my window, so beautiful Canadian day.
Wonderful. That's why I prepared my shirt already with the skis on it, and I hope to come back to Canada for skiing and hiking as it's so lovely nature there. But that's not the reason we touched on that podcast. There are some other pieces like humans. I think we got connected. Maybe for the listeners coming back, how happened that you are such a grateful coach now being in your role as well with positive intelligence, which is one of my favorite places to be as well. But on the other side of the usage, how came it from your career that you ended there? Can you give us a little bit? You started, I know, diploma in advertising, but how came it that you're where you are now?
Yeah, it's all kind of like unfolds and connects to everything. Specifically, I'll start how I came to positive intelligence is by doing coaching training and becoming a coach. And part of the coaching training for me was to learn actually to self-manage myself, because when I was a coaching client, it's so important that I leave all my beliefs, values, and anything, any stories about what's happening with the client out and truly focus on the agenda of the client and on their values. And that was not easy for me because I like to talk and I have opinions. So I was doing my personal development actually to kind of like quiet that voice in my head and also, really be listening to somebody and really, also help them to switch from their being lost in their story, being lost in their fear, and actually switch that, brain activation and switch that, emotional state from fear and concern to, openness, seeing big pictures so they can find their solutions during that coaching session. I can create that container. And that seemed like impossible task. I was like, I barely can manage my own emotional and inner state. And here, learning to be a coach, I have to hold myself together. I have to hold that container for somebody else and actually be in a position to basically, if I'm not able to shift them from what in positive intelligence we call, saboteur brain, like that fear, response when we're seeing a very narrow picture of the world and kind of in a survival mode, to shift it to what we call a sage part of the brain, our prefrontal cortex, and emotional, all the the part of the brain that has access to big picture view, to creativity, to innovation, so we can create solutions together. So positive intelligence book was recommended to me for that reason, and I dived in and I obviously loved it and gave me great tools. And then shortly after I read the book, the first cohort of coaches training became available. And so Shirzad, the author of Positive Intelligence book and the creator of Positive Intelligence PQ program, app-based program, started offering it to coaches, to go through the training, and to go through the, grant program was very generous, offering on his part and ability to train. So interesting thing, all the coaches around me were telling me, let's do it, let's jump in, get this into the first cohort of training. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't go to the second cohort. Timing is everything. Like, you need to be ready. And I think that taught me the empathy towards our clients right now when we say, oh, this is a great program, let's do it. And you realize the timing, everything needs to align for the company, for the team to do it. And that's why it's effective. That's when it's truly effective. So I came through the fourth cohort of coaches training. I think we're in cohort 12 right now. And
I was in the 6 months.
Okay, yeah. So so that's how it started. And actually, after going through the coaching training with positive intelligence, at first, I all of a sudden, for the first time, I saw that my timeline to become a coach became like full-time coach shrunk. because I was thinking it will be 5-10 years. I need to do certain things. I need to make some sort of, put some sort of financial things together in order to make that leap. And all of a sudden doing the program, I realized, no, I can do it now. And that's what I did. In 2021, I left my full-time job at that time and started coaching full-time and using positive intelligence. The work that I was doing was a lot focused on larger companies and with some focus on sales teams as well. And I kind of my story of it is that I got on the radar with senior management and positive intelligence, and I was asked to come in and join the team. That for me, it was like dream came true again a couple of years earlier. Like when we are on our path and we're doing the work that we're supposed to do, like timeline shrinks. Things happen much faster. And that was the case with me. And I had resistance to it, I would say at first, because I was enjoying being on my own, doing coaching. And I was a bit scared going back to like kind of the business building situation and being part of the business development and sales teams, which is, sales profession in itself is very ego driven. There's a lot of competition. There is a lot of, winning and achieving the targets. And I had resistance to coming back, but I had in a way I had the choice, but I didn't have a choice because I felt like I was asked to get a seat on the rocket ship and I just can't miss that opportunity. So it's been over a year now. So it's since August 2021 that I am part of the team at Positive Intelligence and now bringing the program instead of as a coach one-on-one or smaller teams, bringing the program to a very large teams and large organizations. And that's how we met.
Exactly. And the funny thing is I purchased that book already some years ago. I had it in my bookshelf, never read it. When I heard as well about the grant program, I said, it's marketing. I know a lot of the tools we send around trying to get a lot of money of a customer. So I ignored SU the first rounds. And then suddenly I had no time, I had no intention to invest in me. And then I did it. And afterwards I did directly the certification program. And that's where we get to clear up because he said, I'm at the other side using it as coach for both for companies and for individual coaching as is it such a great asset to use and implement it in my trainings as I see what value about it. How does it fit to your sport as knowing that we have some favorite sports together, it's doing such crazy stuff like Ironman or marathon running, looking maybe now back towards how you have done it before and now thinking about doing it with the knowledge of positive intelligence. Is there a difference?
Yeah, it's a big difference. So I'll give some context to your listeners too before I give my example. Positive Intelligence program, it's a mental fitness program. So it's brain training program. And it focuses on building 3 mental fitness muscles. And one is, we just mentioned saboteurs. So it's intercepting saboteurs, like intercepting those fear-based thoughts and patterns and, and stopping them before they run you, and then be able to shift the brain activation to the sage part of the brain, to the part of the brain that's where we, as I said, have access to, like our wider potential and innovation and creativity and driven by, not by fear, but by purpose and passion. So in the way to switch the brain activation, we use a technique that we call PQ wrap. And so positive intelligence, we shorten it to PQ. And the wrap is lifting weights, because it's mental fitness. And so the examples of the PQ wraps is paying undivided mental attention to physical sensations. So it's a sensual experience, either feeling the touch of your fingers, or your palms, so paying undivided attention to the physical touch, using it visual PQ wraps, focusing on the object, auditory sensation, and food, taste. So back to sports. How it all relates to sports is that I did my personal best on my last Ironman 70.3, which is half Ironman distance in this last year. So just over a year ago, not because of my training, but because truly leaning into, doing PQ reps while I'm racing. So really on a swim, I was feeling the water. I was even in positive intelligence, we use ease and flow a lot because the path of sage is the path of ease and flow. So on my swim, I was ease and flow was my mantra. I was really feeling the water. And on the bike is my favorite, is feeling the wind. So there is no conversation in your head. Like you bike, you eat, like you timed your drinking, eating, and you just feel the wind and look at outside. And then on the run, it's just really focusing visually, like on people and trees. And so really engaging the sensory, all the senses. And I was blown away when I came off the bike and I realized what my time was and, that I can do my personal best if I just, continue doing that on the run. And I think that was a big testament for me, how much it works in athletics.
Yeah, I see sometimes it's dangerous in the training sessions, going in, because if I'm getting too much in the positive flow, I'm pushing too strong. When I'm out of my zone where I should do my training, and when it's going negative, you're getting too high with your pulse rate. And
I can see, yeah.
In the finish line of a marathon, that doesn't matter because the last 2 kilometers, which is a joy pure if you have it.
Jürgen, but what a beautiful example, because it's interesting. Certain things we need to do in training, it's almost like the things we need to do in our everyday life. We don't have to push super hard. And it's so counterintuitive in endurance sport training that we need to stay in a certain time zone, which kind of feels slow. And we're like, we want to go faster because we're just excited and we can do harder run, or bike. But it's not going to work because it's too hard. You're not going to recover as fast. You're not going to build the endurance that you need staying. So, and I find for me, when I started endurance sports training, it was a big perspective shift when the coaches tell me look at your heart rate and train in this zone. And I was like, I'm not even running, I'm walking basically to stay in this zone. And that slowing down will make you faster. I was like, I'm just not buying it, and it was until you see the results. And I find the same thing we encounter as coaches, especially coaches bringing positive intelligence into companies. You're asking people to slow down and they're like, okay, I'm too busy. I have to do this meeting, that meeting. I can't do it because it's so counterintuitive. And then when you actually slow down, you speed up. So thank you for that. That was good.
That's what I realized, implemented it more and more in my daily business as well, preparing for training, for presentation. If you're switching on your computer and say, I have now to do my presentation or my training concept, nothing will happen because you think I have to do it. If you're doing a break, going out for a walk or a run, coming back with a fresh mind and a great idea, you have done it sometimes in half an hour.
Yeah.
When maybe your saboteur coming back because of perfect thinking, you think about it was too easy. It couldn't be that it's so easy.
Yeah. Well, because it's also when we get into that adrenaline rush. So when we are in a saboteur brain, we don't have access to the brain, the part of the brain that can make good decisions. So people very often beat themselves up or don't have a willpower. They fall into any sort of bad habits or addictions, I told myself that I'm not going to drink, or I told myself that I'm going to work late today. And here I am doing this or eating or drinking. But the thing is that it has nothing to do with willpower, because when you don't, that part of the brain, when you're in that, stressful adrenaline driven state, the part of the brain that has willpower is offline, it's disconnected. So there is no point, and that's why in the program, we, ask people, to take those breaks, 30-second break, 2-minute break. You don't have to meditate or do any mindfulness for, more than 2 minutes, but just take a small break, because just 30 seconds, ideally 2 minutes plus, will start flashing the adrenaline, start switching brain activation. So you can actually get access to your willpower and make better decisions.
That's really that easiness which convinced me is so strong. As in my Ironman time, before I start, I did meditation. Everybody around getting nervous. I was sitting down, completely shut off. And now you can do it in 2 minutes instead of 15 minutes or half an hour with the same impact. And that is unbelievable. As well with more consciousness about what you do, like being full of joy doing an Ironman. People sometimes discussing, it's painful. I need to do against my pain something. And I said, no, it's joy. Let's see what happened around learning a lot. So that sage thinking brings such a different way how you start such events. Where I say, yeah, that's what I now realize, what sometimes luckily I did in the past correctly, but now I can do it with purpose and much easier. And that's really helpful, especially if you have crisis, if you're having your muscle better in place, like your body as well, you can faster recover from it and faster respond to it. Crisis will still happen in the life. That's life, but the way is how you faster recover from it and handle it. Do you see a chance out of it or solutions out of it, or if you're stuck in the problem and in the crisis? And I think that is a great way that I see as well. Talking about crisis, you mentioned you are as well social engaged. You are engaged for people having trouble with alcohol.
Oh yes, yeah. It's yeah, this is part of kind of like part of my life and big part of my life. Growing up, I was around addiction, and I grew up in Ukraine, and I think it's just generally like a drinking culture, and then lived through the collapse of the country in Soviet Union, which just exploded in drug addictions and even higher alcohol rates. So I lived through it kind of with my family, like with members of my family, and then because of that, I actually chose not to stop drinking completely. Like as soon as I came to Canada and was in my early 20s, just because I don't think I can manage it, and I've seen the worst. And what happened though, when I stopped drinking, the addiction was directed to work. I became like a classic workaholic, adrenaline driven, no breaks, sometimes no vacations for 5 years, working through the weekends, like not having as much to show for it, considering how much time was being put in and energy. So I think that was my first realization when a coach, that I was business coach I was working with, helped me see it. And it was way before positive intelligence, way before I was, have any coaching training. But that was a wake-up call for me, just to realize that whatever biology and mental patterns I inherited from my upbringing and from my family, just when you stop, drinking, they're not going to disappear unless you do additional work. I think that led me to studying. It's actually why I wanted to become a coach. I thought I'll be like a coach, specifically like a recovery coach, doing something with addiction. And and it's interesting because at some point I actually started drinking, and it escalated to unpleasant levels when I have to actually do my own work before I can, do it for other people. I went into recovery myself, and right now addiction community, addiction recovery community, is a big part of my life. Like I'm part of this 12-step program, wonderful people that are there, and I'm also now a part of She Recovers community, which is a community for women in recovery, in various types of recovery. So
wonderful.
And the thing is interesting that, and now, having that perspective, on the individual level, I now see addictive behaviors in companies. Like I basically I have that lens, like the VR, like my headset, my addiction lens, when I see the behaviors of organizations and teams, and when there is a problem, and instead of going to the root cause and finding out what is the reason of that problem, and having which is not easy to do, and having it bravely look at the root cause, and then having a solution that actually solves that, the root cause of the problem. It's basically company can have an addictive approach to it, of pour some, efforts or money on the problem without truly fixing the problem.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it really, because I know it's not easy to talk about it, especially as this is a topic in companies we don't touch. Nobody likes to speak about it. And I realize it often coaching leaders, how many of them are really sometimes depressed, how many of them needs to take drugs. Alcohol is the easiest one. Sometimes have stronger stuff because it is expected that they run like a machine, 24 hours, a whole year, as long as possible with the working times. And that is not fair. No? And they lost to be a human again and to have breaks. And I think here is one of our root causes I see, that we have to switch it. But there is still a human on top, and they need their breaks, and they are allowed to make mistakes, and not to blaming them, the whole the saboteurs we see, that we have that hyperachiever, that controller, that stickler, which are expected on a top leadership level.
Yes. Jürgen, I actually want to give another example of impact of positive intelligence, like when people, because very often people ask me, like, what was impact on you of positive intelligence? Like when I'm talking to leaders, and it's like, what was your experience? And we already talked about the impact on athletic performance, but that was more recent. What really was the first visible impact on me to really believe in the program and an approach is at that point when I was first going through initial 6 weeks program through the coaching training, I was still drinking. And for me, when I would finish work and have all these voices in my head telling me how I didn't do this, I didn't do that, and what a failure I am. And obviously nobody outside thought I'm a failure. It's like all the internal critic, thinking how there's not enough time and all that, like the stress. Like it's like I would describe it like turning on 5-6 different radio stations and full, like that's the amount of noise in my head. I had no ability to, with all my running and even meditation, I couldn't really stop it. And until you have a couple of glasses of wine and then you're like, the volume is down, nobody's talking, I can, relax. A couple of weeks into the program, I finished my workday and I was like, and then I say, okay, this is all lies of my saboteur and judge. I don't have to listen to that. And all of a sudden, the voices stop. I almost went like, what happened? Like it was almost like too good. Like that I started achieving that level of mental fitness, that strength of switching my attention. It's like, I don't have to listen to that. And the conversation, the nasty conversation in my head stopped. I'm like, so what? I don't have to drink? And so I think that was probably the first personal visible impact of mental fitness training on me.
Wow, that's wonderful. No, it's great that you're now bringing that back as well to a company, to talking about that. Maybe not as direct as we did it in the podcast, but in the way you can implement it, that we realize that there's a different way to lead and to work than in that rat race we are currently in. And that's as well my experience in some of the companies who already invested a little bit in that switching, that the impact in the culture of a company, the love, the empathy is a completely different way. And surprisingly, we are more successful than before.
Yeah. So that internal kind of battle that I described was my own saboteur voices and nastiness, like it's this internal conflict, internal war, like that's happening in our teams, right? Like in our organizations. And some of it is not visible, the same like it was not visible to anybody what's happening in my head. Sometimes that conflict that teams have is not visible too, but there is tension. You can feel it in the air. Things are not happening. People walking on eggshells, like there is just some sort of like, just there is no flow, right? And I think that collaboration is one of the big reasons it's brought on a team level. For general, like wider company rollout, when we're doing hundreds and thousands of people at a time through well-being initiatives, through benefits, global benefits, through well-being programs, when it's brought in not as much as to work on the team dynamic and the collaboration, innovation within the team and conflict management, but more general well-being, like learning for people to manage stress, because everybody is talking about how fast things are moving right now, the speed of change. And by change, everybody says change management and change, but what we mean is really growth. So it's managing growth. And so the way we're like growing, the way things are changing, and because change also has some like this negative feeling about it, like because brain's initial reaction is to resist it. So we have to manage it. So I think that the relationships, the well-being, and then we talk about athletic performance, but the same, our just general performance at work, which is we all like for executives, for sales leaders, for sales teams, for product teams, we're all like corporate athletes. A lot of riding on us, like a lot of pressure. We need to perform. And that performance, has a big impact on everybody's performance has a big impact on the person earning potential and the success of the company. So I would say those 3 areas are the areas that are greatly impacted, and they're obviously all connected, right? Like performance, well-being, and relationships. Because ultimately, our relationships determine the quality of our relationships with people around us, determine the quality of our life. The thing is that we're forgetting that our relationship with ourselves, the conversation, that internal dialogue that we constantly, like, we're in a relationship with ourselves more than anybody else. Because of how much time we spend with ourselves. So that's where the program starts with us, right? Kind of having that.
And I think that's something I see very often now, that the technology is improving so fast. We as humans cannot compete anymore with that change. And we forgot that we are all humans.
Yeah. Yeah, the fast pace, to maintain the fast pace that the work life and life requires from us, pretty much need to disconnect from our body. Like, it's almost like the way soldiers, when they're trained in the military, like for military combat, to withstand the trauma of the military combat and the harsh conditions of the war, like the training is learning to kind of like disconnect from your body. Because if you're in your body, when you're witnessing the war, like, you're going to throw up, like you have a visceral reaction. You're going to have like all this written into your body and see this trauma. So disconnecting, from your body, disconnecting from like writing it all into yourself as a memory is part of the military training. That's why the integration back to civilian life is so important for soldiers, because it's like they're not connected with themselves, because they are machines on the warfield. And tie it back to the corporate life right now. We're not in our work in the laptop, even, or in a nice, beautiful office. We're not in physical danger, but we feel, our body feels we're going to die because of the amount of, stress and pressure. It's like all the emotional danger we're feeling and pressure. It feels like, we're back to that survival. And we're, again, disconnecting from ourselves and like becoming these machines doing stuff. And then we turn around and face our family. And it works. That performance works, like, to a certain degree. It's like people say, like, well, but my saboteurs are good for me. If I didn't have my insecurities, I wouldn't be a VP. Well, you might have been a senior VP and you might have not lost your marriage. People, like, first of all, if they have to withstand that type of stress and pace, they need to have a tool to integrate back, once they turn around and, interact with their family. And right now we do it a lot of us working still remotely and, or forever remotely in some positions. We're constantly with our families and with our loved ones. And then the next frontier, we're talking about the future of work. Do we have to be in this battlefield? Or can it be more joyful, playful, not life-threatening experience of going to work?
Like this podcast.
We get in, we're like, we don't know what we're going to talk about. Let's just flow with it. And it's unfolding.
Wonderful. Julia, if you're looking to the future of you, the next 12 months,
yes,
are there something that you say, I'm really excited about what's coming, if you're already allowed to talk about it?
For sure. Yeah. I'll start actually with my personal life that's not related to my professional. I'm going back to actually doing full Ironman racing, like full distance Ironman. Last time I did it almost 7 years ago, and then I just couldn't do it because of my family and life situation and pandemic too. And it's such a big part of my joy when I feel alive being on a race course and being on my bike. So my big exciting part is actually doing an Ironman in 2023. And it also means, from my previous experience, that everything else kind of falls into orbit around it. Like, I find it's very easy for me to structure my life and feel great, be my sage, be my best self when I'm doing something, when I make time to do something that brings me so much joy. And that was actually on the shelf. I wasn't giving myself permission in the last couple of years to do enough of that. And I just thought, I need to put my work first and other things. And just like, and on a professional side with positive intelligence, I'm actually looking to focus a lot more exclusively in my work on working with the technology companies. And because positive intelligence serves great like big variety of companies. We do work in healthcare and education. I personally worked with financial institutions, with pharmaceuticals, and my true passion is in technology, working with the technology companies. I find, it looks like I will be able to do that. I love technology because I feel like people who work in technology, they're like musicians, not musicians, might be musicians too, but magicians, like it's magic. So it's always innovation. Innovation is very exciting for me. And it's also the work that we do at Positive Intelligence, how people develop their internal technology, their inner technology of empathy, forgiveness, creativity. So I think that there will be a big impact that I can make with my work, developing people who develop technology, developing teams who develop technology, because technology as we have it today is already at the godlike state. And it's not my words, I'm using one of my favorite quotes from Edward Wilson is actually that we have the problem with the humanity right now, that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. So we went so far in what technology we have in our hands. We have medieval institutions running the society, and we have Paleolithic emotions, the way we're not trusting our emotions, not able to manage our emotions. So I think that for us to catch up with our technology, will be crucial for the future of humankind. So I'm really excited to be part of that.
Thank you. And I hope we have some way together for that, because I think that's as well one of my dreams, to be more on that level. Julia, thank you so much. What a nice closing. I wish you the best for your Ironman. Mine will wait a little bit longer to become true, but hopefully I can do it as well again. This is my wish list as well. And let's rock and roll with mental fitness for next year and more humanity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah.
And hope to see you soon.
Same.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you. Bye.